The blue light from the TV flickers and reflects off the walls of our living room, and I feel half asleep. Sarah is sitting next to me, watching some reality show that I've already forgotten the name of. It feels like any other night. "I can't believe she actually said that," Sarah says, laughing at whatever drama is unfolding on screen. Normally her laugh is infectious, but tonight it's just noise. I mumble an answer, not having heard what was said. I've been drifting in and out, and my attention has been wandering. The time is 9:47 p.m., and I was just about to suggest we go to bed early when I hear the unmistakable sound of a text message arriving on Sarah's phone. She doesn't pick it up, but I can see her tense up a little bit. Her phone is on the coffee table in front of us, and I can't help but glance down at it. The message is visible on the lock screen. "Can't wait to see you again tonight," it says. It's from someone named Jay. I feel like I've been punched in the gut. "Man, this episode's really heating up," Sarah says, unaware that I'm now feeling the opposite of comfortable. She picks up the phone, and I see her dismiss the notification without tapping on it. I cleared my throat. "Who was that?" I asked. "Oh, probably just work stuff," she replies, not bothering to make eye contact with me, her eyes glued to the TV. The way she brushes off my question is unsettling. It felt hot in the room all of a sudden. I stood up, thinking I needed to move around a little bit. "Can I get you a glass of water?" I asked, heading for the kitchen. "Nah, I'm good," she says from behind me. I'm standing in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, trying to collect my thoughts. It occurs to me that Sarah has been staying late at work an awful lot lately, and she was wearing a new perfume the other day. "Hey, Mark," I hear Sarah call from the living room. "Can you bring me some of those chips?" I looked over at the cupboard where we kept the snacks, trying to remember what normal people did in this situation. "Sure," I called back. When I returned, she was typing on her phone. As soon as I came back into the room, she put it away, but I could see she had been texting someone. I handed her a bag of chips. "Thanks, babe." She kisses me on the cheek, and it feels forced. I tried to relax, sitting down on the couch again, but I couldn't. I was paying attention to the TV, but didn't hear a word of what they said. All I could think about was that message. "Can't wait to see you again tonight." Tonight. A few seconds later, Sarah's phone vibrated again. She picked it up and read the message, making sure I couldn't see it, and smiled a little before she put on her poker face again. "Is everything all right?" I ask, despising the way I sound, too shrill, too tense. "Yeah, it's just Emily," she says with a forced chuckle. She's being her dramatic self again. I know how Emily can get, but that's why I didn't believe her. If it had been Emily who told her about this, she would have immediately forwarded the message to me. "Right," I say. "Emily." "I think I'm going to head up to bed," she said, standing up and yawning. "You coming?" "In a minute," I say. "I want to finish this episode." She nodded and kissed me on the top of the head. "Don't stay up too late." I watched her as she went upstairs. She had her phone in her hand, and as soon as she was out of sight, I heard her receive another message. Sitting on the couch, staring at the TV, I felt a growing sense of unease. Who was she talking to? Was it someone I knew? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And what did she mean by tonight? What was she planning? I glanced at the clock on the wall, trying to figure out how much time I had left before whatever it was happened. I heard the shower turn on upstairs, and my heart sank. Was she getting ready for a night out, or was she just washing away the stress of a long day? I couldn't tell. I wanted to go up there and confront her, but I was afraid of what I might find. What if I was wrong? What if I was just being paranoid? But what if I was right? I heard the water stop, and a few minutes later, I heard the sound of drawers opening and closing. She was getting dressed, but for what? I checked the time again. It was 10:23 p.m. It was late, but not too late. I felt like I was running out of time, but I didn't know for what. I stayed up all night, tossing and turning, unable to shake the feeling of unease. She came back home around 2 a.m., and I pretended to be asleep when she crawled into bed next to me. I could smell a faint scent of perfume on her, but I didn't say anything. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. By the time I woke up in the morning, she was already gone, leaving only a note saying she had an early meeting. It's the next morning and I'm trying to work from home, but I'm too distracted. I look at Find My iPhone and see that Sarah is at work. Same as yesterday, same as the day before. "Emily's hosting a girls' night," Sarah explained, stabbing at a chicken breast with her fork. We're going to that new wine bar that just opened up downtown. I nodded as I chewed my food. Yeah, she's been going out a lot lately. You know how she is after a breakup? Sarah had chuckled. It's important to be there for her. I just checked her credit card statement again. 3 charges from Sephora in the last couple weeks. A new dress from Nordstrom. She'd been buying makeup like it was going out of style. My phone buzzed. Lunch, need to get out of the office. I thought about it for a few moments. Brian was my friend after all. Yeah, Angelo's 12:30. I text back. Deal, you're paying. The walk to Angelo's is nice and I feel a little better by the time I get there, but that sick feeling in my gut still won't leave me. I saw Brian sitting at a booth by the window and went over to sit down with him. You look like shit, he says, instead of hello. Thanks, you always know how to make a guy feel special. A waitress came by and gave us some menus, although we didn't need them. Usual? She asks. We both say yes and she leaves. So, Brian shifts closer. What's really going on? You've been acting weird for weeks. I drew a shape in the condensation on my glass. Sarah's changed. Different? I don't want to say it out loud. Going out late. New outfits. Phone calls. I pause, speaking so softly I almost can't hear myself. Texts from someone called Jay. He looked a bit worried now, but also skeptical. You don't think you're overreacting? That's what I can't figure out? I sit back as our sandwiches arrive, the smell of fresh bread not helping my appetite. But then she lies to me about small things, stuff that doesn't make sense. Have you thought about, I don't know, asking her? I laughed. Yeah, and say what? Hey, honey, are you sleeping with someone else? That'll go over well if I'm wrong. And what if you're correct? Brian asks softly, which makes it even more painful. I push my plate away with the untouched sandwich still on it. There's an electronics store 3 blocks from here. Mark. He says it like a threat. I need to hear it, Brian. I can't go on like this. This isn't you, man. GPS trackers, spyware. You don't need that. Then what? I snap. How can I fix something if I don't know what I'm looking for? He leaned forward and wiped his fingers on his napkin. Just be careful. Once you go down that road, there's no going back. I was about to say something more when I saw someone coming in the front door of the restaurant. Jacob, from Sarah's office. That's him, I whisper. That's Jay. He glanced over at him. The tall guy? How can you tell? I don't know, but he works with Sarah and look at him. Jacob laughs at something someone says, showing his perfect teeth. He's everything I'm not. I need to go, I say, tossing some money on the table. Thanks for lunch. Mark, hold on. I didn't respond, instead ducking out the side door and making my way over to the electronics store a few blocks away. When I got there, I spoke to one of the employees. Looking for something specific? No, just checking things out, I reply, before heading straight for the cell phones. A burner phone, a GPS tracker, and a code for spyware. Anything else? She asks. I nod and pay with my credit card. I take the bag and carry it out to the car. I receive a text from my wife as I'm getting in. It says, "Can't wait for tonight. Emily is really looking forward to it as well." I sigh as I read it over, contemplating whether to respond or not. Finally, after several minutes of consideration, I write back, "Have fun. Come home safe." I drive home and bring the bag inside. It feels strange to be doing this, but it also feels strange to be so distrustful of my wife. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but it feels like the only thing I can do. I go into my office and open up the bag, then take out the contents. I charge the small GPS tracker and activate the new phone. Then I install the spyware on it, following the instructions provided by the store clerk. My wife comes home a little early to get ready for the evening, and I hide the evidence of what I've been doing, hoping she's not going to see it. "Honey," she calls up from downstairs, "I'm home early to get ready for tonight." "Okay," I shout back. "I'm up in my office, just finishing up some work." I hope she doesn't come up here and see what I've been doing. But even if she does, I know I'll still go through with it. I need to know the truth, no matter what. That night, I wait until late for my wife to come home. She said she would be back around midnight, but that time has come and gone. It's almost 2 in the morning when I finally hear her car coming up the driveway. I wait until she goes to the bathroom, and then I sneak into my office. Sarah left the house a few minutes later. I waited for her to leave before going through with my plan. I sat down in the office, where I kept the surveillance equipment, and opened the drawer. The sun hadn't even set yet. I took Sarah's laptop out of her bag. "This is wrong," I mutter, but I input the code to activate the spyware anyway. I watch the installation progress bar finish, feeling like it's erasing who I am with each percentage point. While I wait, I look at my phone and check the tracking app. I see Sarah's location is at the wine bar, just where she said she'd be. My phone buzzes with a text message. "Don't be a fucking idiot, dude." I ignored it and looked at the laptop display as a simple application started up, promising access to Sarah's emails, messages, and browser history. "Just checking work emails," Sarah had said last week, tilting her screen. But now, I'll know what she was really doing. At first, I find nothing unusual. But after a few hours of searching, I come across another email account that I didn't know about. After a few tries, I managed to guess the password. It's our anniversary. "Oh, Sarah," I say, reading messages from months ago. The first ones seem pretty innocent, just a bit of workplace chit-chat. But as they go on, they become more personal. I see Jacob's name come up quite a lot, shortened to just J. My phone buzzes in my pocket, and I look at a new message from Emily. "Having the best time with your girl." There's a picture attached, showing Sarah at a wine bar, laughing and holding a glass of red wine. I can see Emily in the photo, as well as two other women I recognize from Sarah's work. The picture looks legit, but it feels like a staged cover-up, like an alibi. I go back to the emails. There are some late-night ones, on evenings when Sarah said she was working late or out with friends. The timelines line up perfectly. I hear a creak at the door and jump, but it's just the wind from the open window. I realize I haven't turned on the lights yet. I've been sitting in the dark this whole time, the only illumination coming from the laptop in front of me. I pick up my phone and go to the message thread with Brian. "You were right," I type. "There's something here." He responded immediately, telling me to come over. "Sorry, not yet." "Mark, please. Whatever it is, just take a break." I ignore this too, turning back to the laptop. I see another folder and double-click it. Photos. I open it up and see what I think are going to be naked pictures of Jacob and Sarah at first. But they're not. They're just pictures of the two of them with other people. A lot of pictures, though. And in all of them, Jacob is a little too close to Sarah, smiling a little too wide, looking a little too comfortable with her. My phone buzzes again. Another text from Emily. "Sarah says she misses you." I let out a laugh. "Tell her to have fun." I see Sarah's location hasn't changed, still at the wine bar, at the address she told me she'd be. Then I open up another program on the laptop, this one showing all of her text messages. She gets a text message a minute later. I see it as it comes in. "Coast is clear. Meet you there." It's from Jacob. I take a picture of it with my phone. Then I take a screenshot of it and save it as a PDF file on her desktop, for good measure. I look through her other text messages and find a couple more from Jacob, including one that says he loves her and can't wait to see her tonight. I take screenshots of those as well, and save them just in case. My phone buzzes again. I look at it, expecting to see a text from Sarah. Instead, I see it's from Brian. "Whatever you're doing, stop. Come over now." I begin to text him back, telling him I'm on my way, wondering what the hell is going on, when I see an email pop up on Sarah's laptop. It's from Emily to Sarah. "He bought it. Have fun with Jay." I realize what's happening. Emily is helping Sarah cheat on me. She's been covering for her this whole time, and now she's even helping to set up the rendezvous with Jacob. And Brian's insistence that I come over, his weird behavior at lunch. "When did you find out?" I messaged to Brian. The dots come and go a few times. Then his answer comes in, "Let me explain." I laugh out loud. "That's not an answer. It's hard to explain. Just come here and I'll show you." I didn't reply to him, and instead looked at Sarah's location on my laptop. She was on the move now, but instead of heading home, she was going to the east side of the city where Jacob lived. I found more evidence of their infidelity. Dinner reservations, hotel bookings, movie tickets for 2 on nights when I worked late. Hours went by as I collected everything and saved it on my hard drive. I felt like I was building a case, just like I had done so many times before in my work as a divorce lawyer. Only this time, it was for my own divorce. My phone buzzed one last time, and I saw that it was a text from Sarah. Having such a great time. Don't wait up. I saved the text as evidence, and then continued my work until the sun started to rise. Game on, I say to no one in particular, shutting the laptop and sealing my fate. A few weeks go by. I continue to collect evidence while pretending to be ignorant of my wife's indiscretions. I'm a lawyer, so I'm doing my best to make sure my case is airtight. I leave the house early every morning before she gets home, not wanting to face her and hear her lies. Since I don't have her to make me breakfast anymore, I find myself eating at Linda's house more and more often. I take a sip of my coffee and listen to Linda, pretending to find her stories about the neighbors interesting. 3 weeks have passed since the night in my office. I just think it's funny, Linda says, stirring her tea. Sarah used to be at every book club meeting. Now she's always too busy with her work friends. I took a sip of coffee. She's been working a lot. At work? Linda raises an impeccably groomed eyebrow. Or somewhere else? There was a brief pause, and I let it linger just long enough for Linda to imagine the worst-case scenario. I'm sure it's nothing, I eventually say, trying to keep my tone even. Although Emily is more up-to-date on her plans than I am at this point. Really? I thought they weren't as close anymore. They have their own agreement, I say, the euphemism just veiled enough to be suggestive without being too on the nose. Just then, the doorbell rang. Linda smiled and said it must be Carol. A second later, she came in and announced herself. Sarah was just here, Linda chimes in, pouring Carol a coffee. Was she? Carol asks, sitting down and engaging in the conversation. I saw her at that new store the other day, with some tall guy from work. I tried to act nonchalant, but my hand tensed around the coffee cup. That must have been Jacob, I said. They worked together. Spend a lot of time with him, I heard, Carol says, in a way that makes it clear what she's suggesting. Yeah, well, I'm sure it's fine, I say again, feeling the lie burn my tongue. Sarah's sociable. Linda and Carol look at each other. That look will be passed on to others. All right, Carol says, picking up a muffin. If you ever want to chat. I stood up and glanced at my watch. I better get going. Thanks for the coffee, Linda. As I walked out the door, I knew they would be talking about this all day long. And that was exactly what I wanted. When I got home, I saw Brian had called me 3 times. I deleted his voicemails without listening to them. I didn't want to hear his pathetic excuses anymore. I checked Sarah's location on my phone. She was still at the gym where Jacob worked out. I opened the app that allowed me to spy on her phone and looked at her recent texts. There was one from Emily, one of her friends. People are talking. Be careful. I smiled and closed the app. Linda had sent me a text. Thanks for stopping by. Let me know if you need anything. I replied, I will. Thanks. I needed to keep up the appearance of a concerned husband who was starting to get suspicious, but didn't know for sure. That way, I could manipulate the narrative to my advantage and make Sarah look like the villain. I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. I had collected a lot of evidence against Sarah, but I needed more. I needed to build a case that would not only get me custody of the kids, but also ruin her reputation and make her regret ever cheating on me. I opened my email and started drafting a message to a lawyer, but before I sent it, I paused. Maybe there was another way to deal with this, a way that would be more satisfying and less expensive. I decided to think about it some more. A few hours later, Sarah came home. She looked tired and stressed. I pretended to be asleep on the couch. Sarah kissed me on the forehead and whispered, "Good night." I waited until she was in the bedroom before I got up and went to my office. I had a lot of work to do. The next day, I went to work as usual. I acted as if nothing had happened, but I was constantly checking my phone, looking for any signs that Sarah was up to something. Around noon, I got a text from her. Working late tonight, don't wait up. I replied, okay, love you. But I didn't love her anymore. I hated her, and I was going to make sure she paid for what she had done to me. That evening, I went to a bar and had a few drinks. I needed to clear my head and come up with a plan. I couldn't let her get away with this. I couldn't let her take everything from me. I stayed at the bar until closing time, then took a cab home. I was drunk, but not too drunk to think. I had an idea, a crazy idea, but it just might work. I stumbled into my office and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop and started typing. I was going to destroy Sarah's life. It took me several hours to set everything up. I was exhausted, but I didn't care. I was driven by rage and despair. I was going to make her pay. When I was done, I collapsed on the floor and fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover. But I felt good. I had done it. I had taken the first step towards my revenge. I got up and went to the bathroom to take a shower. As I was getting dressed, I heard a notification on my phone. It was a text from Emily, Sarah's friend. "We need to talk." I smiled. Everything was going according to plan. The sun was beginning to set as I sat down at my computer. I had a lot of work to do, but I was determined to finish it before the night was over. I spent the next few hours gathering more evidence against Sarah, organizing it into a coherent narrative, and making sure everything was in place for the next phase of my plan. Finally, as the clock struck midnight, I was ready to make my move. Emily's message is still up on my phone. I knew she would contact me sooner or later. I made sure she would. On my computer screen, I can see our shared account. Sarah has been using it to pay for clothes, dinners, and hotels. She tries to hide her infidelity, but she is not very good at it. I get another text from Emily saying, "Mark, please, it's important." I ignore it and check my other bank account. The money I transferred yesterday has been successfully deposited. "You have reached your daily transfer limit," the banking app tells me. I dismiss it with ease, entering the security codes I had memorized weeks ago. The doorbell rings, interrupting my rhythm. I see Emily on the camera outside, pacing back and forth on the porch. Her mascara is smudged and her hair is a mess. I wait a few moments before opening the door. "Hey, you're here early," I say, opening the door just a crack. "Can I come in?" Her voice is trembling. "Please?" I look at her. "Sure. Sarah isn't home." "I know," she says, then corrects herself. I figured, with your job." She sits down on the couch where I read the text from Jay. "Coffee?" I say, trying to be a good host. "No, Mark, I have to talk to you about something." I sat down in front of her and tried my best to look concerned. "What's wrong?" I asked. She trails off, wringing her hands in her lap. "Sarah's going to be so mad at me for this, but I can't. What people are saying." I got another notification. "Whenever you're ready," I say. "I've been helping her," Emily says, "with Jacob. I've been covering for them, and I thought it was just an innocent crush at first. But now," I leaned forward a little. "Right now? People are talking, Mark. Not just Linda and Carol anymore. At work, at the club, everyone knows, and they're all looking at me like I'm..." Tears streamed down her face. "Like you're in on it?" I offer. She nodded, looking miserable. "I never should have. Oh God, what kind of friend does that make me? To either of you?" I stood up and looked out the window, checking my watch. Sarah was at Jacob's apartment now, just as I expected. "How long?" I ask. Of course, I already know the answer. 6 months, Emily says. "Maybe longer. I'm so sorry, Mark." I turn back to her, but let some of my anger show in my eyes to make her flinch a little. "Are you sorry enough to give a statement?" "What?" "To my lawyer," I say, walking back to my desk, grabbing a manila envelope. "I've collected evidence proving you were having an affair. Texts, emails, credit card receipts for hotel rooms." Her face goes pale. "You knew?" "I know everything, Emily, including the fact that you used your company credit card to book their little vacations. I wonder what the HR department would think of that." "You wouldn't," she begins, but I cut her off, sliding bank statements across the coffee table. "I would, unless what?" I sat back down on the chair. "Unless you help me finish what you've started." She looked at me, tears streaming down her face, her mascara smudged. "What do you want me to do?" "You're going to keep pretending, but you're going to give me updates. Every time he sets up a meeting, every time he makes a reservation, anything and everything." "And if I refuse?" I smirked. "Then these statements go to your boss and your husband." She sighed. "You're not who I thought you were." "No," I tell her. "I'm me. Sarah just didn't pay attention." As soon as she walks out the door, I sit down by the computer and execute the next step of my plan. I log onto the stockbroker website, the one where Sarah's father's fortune is invested. I transfer most of it to a secret offshore account. By the time she finds out, the money will be long gone. I get a new text from her. "We'll be late, honey. Grabbing a drink with my colleagues. Don't wait up." I check the tracking app. Still at Jacob's place. "Have fun," I reply, attaching a smiling emoji to the end for effect. I pull up our house on the municipal website and transfer the deed into my holding company. Sarah's electronic signature is on file since I had her sign a few things a few weeks back. She thought they were mortgage renewal papers. My phone buzzes again. Brian. I ignore it. I've been busy all day putting this together. Tomorrow she will wake up and everything will be the same, she'll think. But really, I've been preparing to destroy her life. The front door opened and I heard Sarah coming in, humming to herself as she walked in the door. "Honey?" a voice calls from downstairs. "You back?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to look more serious. "Up here!" I shout back, just wrapping up some work. The trap is set. Now we wait. It's been 3 weeks since I found out about Sarah, and I've been busy, planning, plotting, preparing, all while pretending everything was normal. And now I'm ready. I looked down at the leather-bound folder in my hands and ran my fingers over our names. It had been a gift from Sarah's parents on our wedding day. The divorce papers inside it were meticulously drafted. I looked out the window. The sun was slowly setting over the city. Sarah had always loved the view from our apartment. My phone beeped again. Emily. She's leaving Jacob's now. She should be home soon. Right on cue, I respond, opening the tracking app to see Sarah's location. I put the divorce papers on the kitchen table next to our anniversary card. It was cruel, but it was the only way I could think of to get through to her, to make her understand. I had to do this. Maybe it was a bit over the top, but I wanted it to be a shock, to get through to her just how serious I was. And I knew if I tried to do it the usual way, she would talk me out of it. My phone buzzed. It was Brian, my best man at the wedding. He was calling again, trying to talk me out of it. "Don't do this," he said in his voicemail. "Not like this." I put my phone in my pocket and went back to the table, adjusting the folder. It had to be the first thing she saw when she came in. The garage door opened downstairs. I heard the car pulling in, the engine shutting off, and I looked at my reflection in the window. I looked cold and distant. That's what I needed to be right now. The front door opened and I heard her high heels clicking on the floor. "Mark," Sarah says. Her voice has that fake sing-song quality she uses when she's pretending to be happy. "I brought home those pastries from the..." She freezes in the doorway, letting the bag of pastries fall to the floor. "Happy anniversary," I whisper back. She looked at me as if she was beginning to understand. "You already know what it is." She started to step forward, but then stopped, looking hesitant to get any closer. "If this is about me working late..." "Don't." The word cuts through her excuse like a blade. "Let's not insult each other with lies. Not anymore." "Mark, please," she whispers, tears already gathering. "Whatever you think." I handed her my phone, showing her a picture of her and Jacob from earlier that day. Room 812 at the Grand, Tuesday afternoon. Or should we talk about last Thursday at his place? She paled. "You've been following me?" "For weeks, and frankly, you made it pretty easy." I grab a seat. "Take a seat, Sarah. We should talk about the paperwork." She didn't sit down. "I can explain. Your affair, or the funds you were siphoning off to your secret account?" I grin. "Well, not so secret anymore?" "How did you..." She stammers. "I took care of it. The house, the assets, the trust, all taken care of. And quite legally, in fact. You know those papers you signed last month? They weren't for refinancing." She dropped down into the chair again, and her mask slipped. "This isn't you. You're not like this." "No?" I ask. "You'd be amazed at what people turn into when they're cheated on. But I guess you already know that, don't you?" "There's help," she says. "Therapy, a separation, anything you want." I slid the folder over to her. "What I need is your signature, today." "Our anniversary?" She starts crying. "Mark, don't do this. We've been together for 5 years. "I know, it was perfect." I get up and put my coat back on. "You have until the end of the hour to sign. My lawyer's downstairs." Sarah's hands were shaking. "And what if I don't want to?" "Then tomorrow morning, every partner at your firm finds out about your little fling with the married co-worker. Wouldn't that hurt your chances of getting a promotion?" She looked up at me with surprise. Jacob is married? I laughed bitterly. Oh, you didn't know? And his wife is pregnant with their second child? Sarah choked on her words, looking at the documents. I didn't know. To be found? I ask. Yeah. The pen's on page 3. Initial the assets section too. There's not much left to split. As she starts to sign, my phone vibrates again. Emily. Did you do it? Just about, I reply, seeing Sarah's signature being scribbled on the dotted lines. Once she's done, I gather up the papers and, without looking at her, I say, I'll have my lawyer file these today. You can stay at Emily's place. She's expecting you. You turned my best friend against me? Sarah asks, her voice cracking. No, Sarah, you did that yourself. I head for the door, stopping to add, the movers will be here at 9 in the morning. You can take all your things, but only what belongs to you. I'll know if you don't. But just as I was about to step outside, she said something that made me stop in my tracks. I loved you, Mark. At first, I turned around and looked at her. It wasn't a good start, I say. Goodbye, Sarah. I shut the door and left her in her loneliness. In the elevator, I checked my phone one last time. The money was transferred, the house was mine, and the evidence of her crimes was in the hands of the right people. I did it, I text Emily. My phone rang again, and I picked up. You actually did it, he says. He sounds exhausted. I did. And now you're going to tell me how long you've known about them. I reached the ground floor and walked outside, the sun setting on the horizon. Behind me, the skyscraper loomed in the sky, a monument to a revenge fulfilled. Where are you? Brian asks. Talking to my lawyer. Unfinished business to take care of. I reach my car. And Brian, you didn't think I'd leave you out of this, did you? I hang up the phone and get into my car. The divorce papers are still in the glove box. One down, one to go. 3 weeks later, everything is going according to plan. More than that, even. I expected the divorce papers to be served quietly, but they were right on the front page in the morning paper. I expected Brian to be fired from the firm, but I only wanted it to happen to make sure he wouldn't be able to afford a decent lawyer. And I expected to make Sarah look bad in front of her friends, but I never dared to hope I would be able to set her up to make a fool of herself like this. It was a bonus, and a welcome one at that. It's been a few days since Sarah's return to the club. I heard she was met with a cold reception. The gossiping women who usually sat at the front of the restaurant were said to have left in a hurry when she arrived. Unfortunately, Mrs. Bennett, the hostess announced, your membership is currently on hold. No, Sarah said, sounding a bit miffed. I have a membership here. The board voted this morning. The hostess doesn't look at her. I can call you a ride if you need. I take a sip of my coffee as she looks around, trying to find someone to back her up. There wasn't anyone. This is insane, she says, louder this time. I want to talk to Margaret. Mrs. Whitman stepped down from the board last week, the hostess says, following the incident. And then she realized her husband had also been one of Jacob's confidants about the affair. The pieces kept falling into place. I got a text message from Emily. She arrived at the club, just like you said she would. I know, I reply. I can see you both from here. Sarah left in a hurry, tears in her eyes. Quite the ordeal, a voice says from beside my table. Margaret Whitman is standing there, dressed in navy blue. Care to sit? I ask, gesturing to the open seat. Margaret sits down in her chair. That was more difficult to watch than I thought. I'm glad you chose to resign from the board, I tell her. It's the right move. The right move being to teach a lesson, she gestures for coffee. Or, I suppose, the lesson that you created, Mark. I shrugged. I just told them the truth. They assumed the rest. People believed what you wanted them to believe. Her coffee arrives, and she carefully stirs in cream. What I want to know is, how long do you keep doing this? Until justice is done. Margaret gives a quiet laugh. Justice or revenge? My phone beeped again. Another message from Carol. Sarah just tried to get into the tennis club too. No luck there either. I showed the message to Margaret. The beauty of social exile, she says, is that it's more powerful than any legal punishment. You can bounce back from losing all your money, but a reputation? That sticks. I saw Sarah sitting in her car, with her head buried in her hands. I took a picture. Huh. You wouldn't happen to know that Jacob's wife went into early labor this morning, would you? Probably from the stress of having it all go public, Margaret said. I hear that mother and baby are just fine, but the hospital asked Sarah to leave when she came by to visit. Daring of her to show up at all, Margaret says. Or desperate. My phone started buzzing again. Brian. I ignored it. Desperate reminds me, Margaret says. Emily was here yesterday. She's afraid she's going to lose her job at the foundation. As she should be, I reply. Accessories get punished too. The smell of rain is in the air. The color of the day and the mood is gray. The girl's car disappears in the distance. Just so you know, Margaret says, getting up to leave, this may have started with people thinking of you as the victim in this marriage, but, she stops, looking at me carefully. But now people are starting to wonder if maybe Sarah isn't the only one who can be a little cold at times. I looked her in the eyes. People can think whatever they want. The truth is the truth. Does it? She fixes her pearls. Or does it say whatever we want it to? After she leaves, I stay at my table watching the sky grow dim. Sarah's location on my phone shows her driving aimlessly around town. From her tennis club to the spa, from an old yoga class to her favorite store. All places where she's no longer welcome. I get a text from an unknown number. Please, I have nothing left. What more do you want? I save Sarah's new number and write back. It's not about what I want. It's about what you deserve. As I finish my drink and pay the bill, the rain starts to fall. Each drop is a reminder of the steps I've taken to bring Sarah down. Tomorrow will bring more surprises for her. A charity event where she'll be uninvited, a social gathering where she'll be snubbed. The destruction isn't over yet. There's still so much more to do. So many bridges to burn, so many doors to slam in her face. I get one last text as I make my way to my car. It's from Emily. She's crying in her car outside my house. Should I let her in? I hesitate for a moment, considering Sarah's tears. The rain taps against my windshield, a gentle melody of satisfaction. Well, that depends, I write. Are you ready for Act 2? The rest of the night and the early morning hours are spent preparing for what's next. When I leave my apartment, it's a rainy autumn morning. I drive to the other side of town. It takes me 17 minutes. I park my car 3 blocks away from where I need to be. I waited until I knew Sarah was at work, then walked over to her office. I left the package with someone in HR and received confirmation via email. It's done, Emily texts. I left it on Karen's desk. I looked at the time. 8:47 a.m. Sarah's dot was right on schedule. She would be getting out of her car right about now, making her way to the elevator, and beginning the workday which would lead to her downfall. I wondered if the log at the security desk downstairs would show something arriving in the mail for her, something very ordinary and uninteresting. Do you need anything else? Emily's next text message says. Just let me know, I respond, and put my phone on silent. I see Sarah walking into the lobby of the building, just getting off the elevator. She's dressed up and wearing makeup, still blissfully ignorant of what's coming for her. She orders a coffee from the Starbucks and heads back upstairs. The coffee in my hand is growing cold as I watch her disappear. The information I've gathered on her shows a pattern. Unexplained expenses, late-night meetings, intimate emails. Mr. Bennett? I turned around to see it was Karen from HR. Karen, you're not supposed to be here. Come with me, she says, pointing to a nearby coffee shop. I want to discuss the news we got this morning. Karen sits down at a table in the back of the cafe. I'm guessing you know what I wanted to talk to you about, she says. I gave him a confused look. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. Mark. She sits up. There is a lot of proof. But unless we go on the record, I'm asking you if you sent this. Did you? Proof of what? She took out a folder and opened it. I recognized it instantly. These are pictures of your wife cheating on you with Jacob Andrews. My expression went from confused to understanding to pained. I see. They're having a board meeting today. She's a director at the company and Jacob's married. It's a bit complicated. Right. I looked down at my cup of coffee. I guess I should have known this would come out sooner or later. She hesitated. There's something else. I found some financial discrepancies in their expense reports, for both of them, going back several months. I glanced at her with an expression of genuine surprise. What do you mean? Hotel charges, restaurant bills, all marked down as client meetings, but... She pauses, looking at me. You weren't aware of this? I knew about the affair, I confess. But I didn't go through our finances. Just then, a text message from Emily. It said, "They called her in. It's happening right now." I put my phone away. The board has decided to suspend both of them pending a more thorough investigation, and since there are allegations of misappropriation of funds, it might even involve legal action. I get it. I rise to my feet, performing my part as best I can. Thanks for being straight with me. Mark? Karen says, as I'm opening the door. I'm really sorry. You didn't deserve what she did to you. I walked out the front door, checking the app on my phone and seeing Sarah's phone was still in the HR office. My guess was she was getting fired right about now. Security's dragging her out, Emily texts. She's in tears. I went back to my spot across the street. A few minutes later, Sarah came out of the building with her purse in her hand. She looked like she had been crying. Then my phone rang. It was Sarah. She was calling me. I watched her on the sidewalk. She held her phone to her ear. I didn't pick up. After 4 signals, it went to voicemail. You fucking broke me, her text says a moment later. Are you proud of yourself? I didn't answer, just kept on watching her. She tried to hail a cab, and after a few attempts, one finally stopped for her. An hour until the board meeting, Emily tells me. They'll be going over all their latest cases from the past 6 months. I know. An accounting scandal is the last thing a law firm wants to be associated with. And by tonight, Sarah will be just as ostracized from her work colleagues as from her friends. A final text message comes in, this time from Jacob's wife. Thank you for telling me the truth. About everything. I save the message, storing it along with the others. The clouds above are getting darker. It will rain soon. I thought I would feel better after this, but I don't. Instead, the void inside me expands, fueled by the havoc I've wreaked. But it's too late to stop now. There's no going back. Phase 3? Emily messages you. I looked up at the office building, imagining the boardroom where careers were being ruined at this very moment. No, I say. They'll stew for a bit. The anticipation is the worst part. The rain starts to pour down as I retreat from the scene, leaving the first act behind me. This was just the beginning, I remind myself. One step closer to my goal. But the next act would have to wait until after the rain. 3 weeks passed after Sarah was fired, and it was finally time for the final act. This was what I had been waiting for. The rain that had started to pour down that day had not ended until now. I had been expecting it to end with thunder, but the climax of the storm was yet to come. It had only just begun. I knew that as I stood in the courthouse, waiting for the trial to begin. I saw her sitting on a bench in the hallway outside the courtroom. 10 minutes until we begin, Mr. Bennett, my lawyer whispers, appearing at my elbow with a leather briefcase that contains months of premeditated ruination. Is everyone here? I ask, and I know the answer. Emily arrived early. She's already inside. Jacob called in sick. I smile. He did. The courtroom doors opened and Sarah flinched. Her lawyer came out, looking stressed and disheveled. Mrs. Bennett, he calls. Let's move inside. Sarah gets up from her seat and begins to walk over to the table. Mark, she says, walking by. Please, you can still come back. I didn't respond. I just kept looking at the door. It was too late 6 months ago. Sarah and I sat in the courtroom as if we were actors in a play that Emily had directed. She sat in the first row, looking as guilty as you can when you're not guilty at all. Linda and Carol were sitting right behind her. All rise, says the bailiff. The judge came in a moment later and sat down at her desk. Sit, she orders. Bennett versus Bennett, case number 47293. Are all parties here? My lawyer stood up. Yes, Your Honor. He provided us with a written statement, which I have here. I heard Sarah gasp beside me. All right, Judge Harrison says. Let's start with the asset declarations. Over the next hour, she presents more evidence. Bank statements, credit card records, and hotel receipts. And those costs, my lawyer says, were falsely accounted for on Mrs. Bennett's and Mr. Andrews' corporate expense accounts. He squirmed. My client has said that these were legitimate business expenses. At the Four Seasons? Judge Harrison raises an eyebrow. At midnight? There are some whispers in the crowd. I notice Linda is paying close attention. Your Honor, Sarah's lawyer persists. The accusations of financial misconduct are baseless and retaliatory, designed to prove fraud? Judge Harrison cuts him off. Because that's exactly what these statements do, counselor. Then Emily is called up, and she slowly, grudgingly admits to everything. And Mrs. Bennet asked you to cover for her meetings with Mr. Andrews? Yes, Emily whispers, looking away from Sarah. She said that it was just a little bit of flirting in the beginning. She began to cry, and her lawyer tried to comfort her. The rest of the morning was spent laying out my case against her, piece by piece. Your Honor, Sarah's lawyer says, sounding defeated as she rises to her feet. In light of everything, my client has reconsidered her stance on the division of property. The judge looked at Sarah, who seemed to have shrunk in her seat. Mrs. Bennet? Do you understand what your attorney is saying? Yeah, Sarah says, tears streaming down her face. I do. The judge looked at the papers in front of her and nodded. All right, I think I've heard enough. Based on the evidence regarding the financial infidelity, I will make my decision. Sarah was crying by the time the judge finished speaking. I would be getting the majority of the assets. And finally, Judge Harrison says, I will be suggesting that the DA's office take a look at the evidence of corporate fraud. Sarah lets out a sharp gasp. This concludes our session. The bang of the gavel echoes in my ears, signifying the end of my marriage and the culmination of my revenge. Rain begins to fall outside, and I see Sarah leaving the courtroom in tears, her lawyer following her closely. Congratulations, Emily says, standing beside me. You did it. I glanced out the window as Sarah walked away. Almost. Another text from Brian. I turned my phone on silent. The DA will want you to talk to them, my lawyer says, packing up his papers. About charging. I nodded, still staring out the window where Sarah had vanished into the downpour. The emptiness inside me was still there, despite the win, but it was urging me to go further. Give them all of it, I say to him. All of the files. What happens now? Emily asked. Now we make sure there's nowhere left for her to hide. We left the courthouse, and the rain kept falling. I could still hear the gears turning, as if they were waiting to finish the job. I don't know how long it took. The rain eventually stopped, and the clouds drifted further west, allowing the golden hour sunlight to turn the remaining clouds into orange and pink. I drove across town, passing the places that used to mean something to me and my wife. She was still trying to call me, but I ignored her. I knew I would have to talk to her eventually. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Everything had changed so quickly. By the time I got home, everything had dried up. I pulled into the driveway of my house. The roses Sarah had planted were starting to bloom in the front yard, the sprinklers watering them in the late afternoon sun. I know what you did, his voicemail had said this morning. All of it. The transfers, the setups, everything. We need to talk. I deleted the message before listening to the rest of it. There was no point in talking to him anymore. I unlocked the front door and went inside. Everything was stripped bare and all of her pictures were gone from the walls. You've reached Sarah Bennet, her voicemail says when I call her. I can't come to the... I hang up before the message finishes. Third time today. Old habits. You have a text message from Emily. DA's office called. They want another statement. You know what to say, I text back. I can still smell her perfume. Or maybe I just imagine it. I pour myself a drink and go out to the back patio. My phone rings again. It's not Brian. Hey, Margaret, I reply, sitting down in a deck chair. It's done, she says. The foundation board voted unanimously. Sarah's family name is coming off the children's wing. How did she take it? She didn't show up. Sent a lawyer. He looked like he was having the worst day of his life. I took a sip of scotch and said, and what about the press release? Tomorrow morning. Tasteful, diplomatic, just a little note about restructuring our donor recognition program. In the window, I see myself. I look like the man Sarah thought she married. Thanks, Margaret, I say, for everything. You might want to hold on to that. I hear they're planning a civil suit. His business partners weren't too pleased with the will. Bring it on, I respond, noticing a cardinal on the bird feeder that Sarah had put up last spring. I have receipts. After I hang up, I open up my phone and look at an image I took from the gallery 6 months ago. The same picture of Sarah and Jacob, his hand on her back. The one which had been sent to my email. A text message pings to my phone from an unknown number. Do you really think you've won? I add Sarah's new burner phone number to my contacts, then send her a message back. Check the newsletter for the foundation tomorrow. You'll see. The flowers in the garden sway in the gentle evening breeze, and I can smell the roses. The whole house behind me is empty now, from top to bottom. No more secrets. No more lies. My phone buzzes again with another text, this time from Emily. Sarah just tried to get into her office. Security called the cops. I don't respond. Some things don't require a reply. The sun is sinking low in the sky. My wine glass is empty, and I don't refill it. I just sit and watch as the shadows cast by the trees stretch longer and longer across the lawn. A final message comes in just as the last light is disappearing from the horizon, and the stars are coming out to play in the dark sky. I never meant to hurt you, Sarah writes. I just felt so trapped. I think about what to write back, and then finally I settle on something. The roses are blooming. I block her number and put my phone down on the table. Leaning back in my chair, I look up at the stars, and I feel at peace. The void inside me is gone now. It's been filled up with something else. Not happiness exactly, but something like it. The cardinal returns to the bird feeder and begins pecking at the seeds again. I watch it for a while, and I realize that with Sarah gone, there's nothing left for me to do. Her final domino will fall tomorrow, and next week
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.